Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here, ready to talk some golf for this week's Worldwide Technology Championship. Excited to go through what to expect last second and make sure we're all on the same page before building all of our lineups for tonight. So we'll go through the golf course. If you haven't seen any of the breakdowns so far, talk the weather, some of the overall just top level strategy when it comes to building your DFS lineups, and then afterwards transition into more of a prop angle. So we'll touch on everything that you need to know going into tomorrow, depending on the different types of exposure you're looking for. But of course, if you have any questions at any stage of the live stream, don't be afraid at all to go ahead and throw it down in chat. When I see it out of the corner of my eye, make sure to get back to you guys in terms of that feedback. Without further ado, let's go ahead and hop right on in. So we'll take a look at the golf course first, which I think is a good starting point, right? Because as the week has gone on, we've gotten more and more information about this track, and my stance has changed quite a bit. So early there on Monday, I thought this looked like maybe the easiest course on all of the PGA Tour. And while that's still possible, I think that's within the range of outcomes. I think I've started to give it a little bit more respect. The distance is there, right? It is nearly 7,500 yards. So that was always apparent. But what I think is maybe a little bit more difficult than I was giving it credit for would be the green complexes. So we've had players like Michael Kim give quite a bit of feedback. We've had a few videos from Property, and the greens have a lot more slope than I thought. So from one of the overhead views that I had seen before the golf tournament, looked a little bit tamer than what we've seen on some of those highlight packages, for example, with Michael Kim was describing as a ton of backstops. So if that's going to be the case, it might play slightly more difficult than I was imagining, because like Augusta National, right? You got to remember, is a wide open golf course. Now, maybe not as wide open as what you're going to get this week, but also has massive greens, right? And the reason why that course is so difficult is because the green complexes are nasty. And this is the first time that we're seeing a Tiger Woods design. Maybe that's what his trademark is going to be, right? We have no idea how this course is going to play. So early in the week, I thought you might see like 30 under par win this golf tournament. Now I've adjusted that closer to like 18 to maybe 20 under par. So still definitely on the easier end of the spectrum, but I've given a lot more respect to these green complexes, and it's slightly adjusted my look at the modeling. So we'll circle back on that when we hop into the player pool, types of players that I'm looking at. But rather than just looking at bombers, right, really good long iron players, I'm also kind of looking for putting specialists, right? If they're going to have real difficult green complexes, who knows? Maybe those 5 to 10 footers are going to have more break than I was expecting, right? Like most resort style golf courses, you're getting like a cup of break at the very most, right? It's like your typical municipal type of golf course where you're not going to have those big breaking putts. If your 5 to 10 footers are going to move a foot like you see at like an Augusta National, I mean, a few players have thrown that out as a comp this week, which I think is wild from the greens perspective. If they're going to be that slopey, then putting is going to matter, right? Making putts from 5 to 10 feet when you have that degree of difficulty is a completely different accomplishment, right, than doing it on greens that are flat. So just wanted to point that out. And that's part of the reason why when we hop into props, that I think the prop boards, especially on like Prize Picks, are priced a little bit too low for strokes. So we'll hop back into that later on, but that is going to be especially important when we look at that angle. When we're looking at the weather, it looks perfect for the first 2 days. So though I think the golf course, maybe not as much of a pushover, as I was stating before, the weather is going to completely cooperate, right? It's going to be as ideal as humanly possible. Tomorrow, you're talking about next to no wind. Your wind gusts getting up to maybe 12, 13 miles an hour by the afternoon. And then if we take a look at the Friday forecast, and we'll cycle through a few of the models here in just a moment. But for Thursday and for Friday, it's looking really calm. So we'll talk about Friday afternoon. That's the one patch on a few models that looks like it might get a little bit windier. But in general, for the first 2 days, the weather is not going to be an issue, right? I mean, look at this model, right? Literally no wind there Thursday. Friday, pretty much the same thing. Icon model has a little bit more significant wind tomorrow afternoon. So that's noteworthy. But then look at this on, that's Friday afternoon that I was referencing with the higher winds. That's one of the models, this in the Medio Blue, that are calling for higher winds on Friday evening. So this Icon model that we were just looking at, right, those higher winds were on Friday. And then if we go over here to the Medio Blue, you'll see the same thing, right? Closer to 20 mile an hour wind gusts over here for this model. So while it looks pretty calm for the first 2 days, The one wave that looks guaranteed to have ideal conditions the whole time is the PM/AM, right? The guys are going off late tomorrow, early there on Friday, because we know tomorrow, pretty much based on all the different models, looks perfect, right? I mean, even this Medio Blue model, right, that's calling for the slightly higher winds there on Friday, is calling for at most, right, 12, 13 mile an hour wind gusts. That's equivalent with this ECM model. It's a little bit higher, right, than this GFS model, but all of them agree, right, that tomorrow in general is going to be near ideal the entire way across the board. So if we take a look at Friday, and there are a few models that are throwing us a little bit of a curveball when it comes to the wind, then why not try and lean into that a little bit, right? So when I was going through breaking ties, trying to decide who to play this week, one little extra cherry on top was to take the PM/AM guys. Typically, that wave is slightly advantageous as you can carry your momentum from round one into round two. But when you have the slight weather advantage going in your direction as well, that's where I think you might get like a half a stroke advantage. So it's not massive. It's not the type of advantage where you should be like stacking 6-0 in any direction. It's not going to have that kind of effect, right? You're talking about maybe half a stroke difference here at the very most. But if you're stuck between two players, one's AM/PM and then one is PM/AM, just go with the PM/AM one, right? If all things are going to be equivalent or it's that close, right, you can't decide. If one is in one way versus the other, it's just a real easy way to make that decision, right? I mean, PGA DFS is tough enough, right? Trying to go out there and handicap a golf course, all the players and whatnot, especially at a brand new venue. If there's going to be even a minuscule weather edge, right? That's the best we're going to get, right? As to a sure edge out there. You could make the argument that distance matters here, right? I went through that with my course breakdown. You could say the same thing about long iron play. But the weather edge, if that's going to be the case, is pretty much a for sure thing. I just realized that I didn't censor my spreadsheet yet. So let me go ahead and do that real quick before we hop into these projections. So I apologize for that. It'll take me a second here. But can't give away my whole player pool, right, to the live stream out there. Of course, guys, that is posted on my Patreon page. But that would be unfair to the people that are paying for them. So let me go ahead, take the player pool out of there. And then let me take the projections, right? That's probably a good idea too. Take the projections off the sheet. Let me make sure I didn't unplug my mic, and if looks like we're good to go, we are. Let's hop right on into it. So I've got my projections up, and let's start to talk through the strategy side of things. So we went through some of the weather, right? Talked about how maybe that PM/AM is the way to go. On a week like this, even more important than any weather edge, than any sort of modeling that you're doing, which at a new golf course, guys, you shouldn't be taking too seriously this week. What's more important is the game theory edge, right? When we're at a brand new golf course, when we're in the fall swing where there's not a lot of recent form to work off of, you should be playing the game theory angle, whether it's for showdown, whether it's for main slate contest. Unless somebody is that much better than everyone else around them, they're probably not worth being twice, sometimes three times as owned. So when we go through my player pool here, you'll see, actually, you don't have my player pool up, but if you're following along on the Patreon page, you'll see that guys like Ludwig Aberg, for example, I'm fading at super high ownership, right? It's not that I don't like Ludwig. I do think that he's an excellent player, arguably maybe worth the 30% ownership. But when we're playing at a course that we've never seen before, it's extremely hard to handicap. A lot of the recent form, maybe outside of like an Aberg, really isn't all that recent. I mean, even guys like, Cam Young, we haven't seen since the BMW Championship. Steven Yeager, we haven't seen in a month playing golf. It's hard to use the projections and all this different modeling that we typically use and have as much confidence, right? It's hard to go out there and be like, this guy is a great play in my model. He's low owned. He's a leverage play. Let's get to them. It's hard to make those decisions this time of year when you have a brand new golf course. So if somebody's going to be way higher owned, fade them. That's my advice this week. It's the perfect week to go out there and just play a game theory edge. And it's why my player pool I didn't make until today, right? Typically, I'm the one to go out there, right? I put out a few plays this week, right? Cameron Young's a core play. I'm still playing him, of course. Same thing with Emiliano Grillo. But outside of my top 4 or 5 plays, I didn't mark anyone down in my player pool till today. I needed to see the ownership. I needed to know where the game theory edge was going to be, because here's the fact of the matter. Let me give you a perfect example, okay? So in terms of a super chalky player, right, you've got Cameron Champ down here. Now, Cameron Champ, right, the reason why everyone wants to play him is that he's in pretty good form. So he's playing pretty well. You can see he's number, 19 when it comes to recent form ranking. That's solid for Cameron Champ. But the issue is, and everyone's like in love with him. It's not just the form. It's like, oh, he's a bomber. He fits this golf course, right? That's the narrative that's going around Twitter. It's why a lot of people have bet him. It's why he's going to be extremely popular in DFS. The unfortunate angle is, and I agree with that, right? I think the only person that put out like a legit course breakdown this week, like went hole by hole and whatnot. And I think a lot of people watched my breakdown, whether they'll admit it or not out there, and have kind of parroted what I said. I agree with everything I said, right? I mentioned Bomber's Paradise, long irons, so on and so forth, but we don't know that. Right? I tried to make that as readily apparent as possible. This course, for all we know, might play completely different than what we expect, right? We've never seen it before. So for all of us to just go, oh, you know what, Cam Champ's a perfect fit for this golf course is a massive, massive mistake, right? And that's coming from somebody that agrees with that general sentiment, right? That does think this is a bomber's paradise. I would just push back and say that there are different ways to get there. Another way to get there might be a Ben Griffin, right? And I think he's the perfect example of where the field is making a mistake, right? Cameron Champ, I've got it 16% ownership, whereas Ben Griffin, I've got it 8%. Ben Griffin playing arguably just as well, right? In terms of recent form, he's number 29 as opposed to number 19. But in terms of total model ranking, which normally these are blacked out, right? Over here to the right, but we'll use them for the sake of this live stream because I forgot to censor it at the last second. You can see he's number 6 in my total model ranking, which is extremely respectable. He's top 6 and he's number 24 in the pricing. If anything, I think Ben Griffin should be chalky this week, right? He's maybe not the conventional player we're looking for, right? He's not a bomber off the tee, but he makes a lot of putts, which will be helpful at a resort style golf course. I mentioned that putting might be a little bit more important, right, than I think most people were considering. And then on top of that, he's a flusher with the irons, right? He's a really good long iron player. So he's maybe not the prototypical build, right? That bomber that everyone is looking for this week. I don't think everyone has to be a bomber, right? I think that's the important part when you're building your DFS lineups. There are plenty of bombers in my lineups, right? You guys know I love Cameron Champ. Sorry, I just said Cameron Champ. Cameron Young, the other Cameron, is the one that I really like this week. You know, he's a bomber, right? He fits that narrative for me. But look at the ownership, right? He's 18% owned, whereas Aberg, who's another bomber, who's 30% owned, right? So if somebody's going to be an ownership pivot and fit my narrative, by all means, I'll go out there and play them. But just because they fit my narrative does not mean I'm playing them this week. So it's a week, in my opinion, to go out there, take some chances, play against the grain type of lineups, because nobody knows what this golf course is going to play like, right? We can speculate all we want, but at the end of the day, it's just that. It's speculation. So I wouldn't go too crazy with it. In terms of higher owned players, Beau Hossler, once again, is super high owned. He burned me at the Zozo, played extremely well. I'll take that one on the cheek, right? I talked a little bit of shit about Beau, and he went out there and shoved it in my face. But yeah, 17% owned once again, no thanks, right? He's like a 10K golfer now. Like, what are we doing? Down here in the 9K range, ownership's pretty spread out. You can see Spawn, Svensson, and Akshay are getting a little bit of attention. So, you know, I would say that they're getting a little chalky, but they're not to the point where you have to fade them. Probably don't play all three is, I guess, the point that I'm getting at there. Make sure that you maybe pick your spots, right? Play the one or two that you really like. Luke List also getting a little bit of ownership, but it's not too out of hand with Luke List. So once again, if you like the spot, get some leverage, right? Play them 25, 30% of your lineups. You just can't play all four of these guys, right? If your lineups, your player pool this week is Luke List and then these three players, just know you're going to have a really hard time getting leverage. So I would shy against that. I would try and maybe take 1, 2 of them out of your player pool. Down towards the bottom end of the 8s, top end of the 7s is where you see a little bit more chalk popping up. So you have guys like Davis Thompson here at 13.7%. You've got Cameron Champ that we talked about before, right? 16.4%. Callum Turan, 12.8%. You got 12.2% here with an Eric Van Rooyen. Almost all of it you can just argue to fade, right? These players in some cases are twice, 3, 4 times as owned as some of the players around them. Right down here, Cameron Champ, I know he's twice the ownership of Ben Griffin, right? Compared to some of the other guys like an Andrew Putnam, right? He's nearly 3 times higher owned. It's just a little bit egregious that some of the players that are chalk this week are chalk. Like Callum Turan, what are we doing? Right? This is a guy who's extremely inconsistent. Like you can't really count on that guy to go out there and even make a cut, right? Let alone finish in the top 25 like we need. Eric Van Rooyen, same thing. High upside golfer. Love that, right? But he's far from a sure thing, right? This guy is extremely volatile. You're going to win more often fading him than playing him. Down here with the Brandon Wu, right? I don't really get that chalk, right? Like he's also an extremely volatile player. just play that game theory edge, right? Fade the guys that are unnecessarily higher owned, and I think you're going to have yourself a week. Two things that'll help you with that, right? First off, ownership projections that are solid, right? That's going to be a key on a week like this. And second off, knowing the game theory edge, right? And, I talk about all the time about fading the chalk, so on and so forth. Let's talk about why that's important, right? I feel like that gets lost in translation when a lot of people are doing their DFS analysis and whatnot. So let me bring up Draftkings. We're going to build a few lineups together, and I'm going to show you the two extremes, right? I'm going to show you what maybe a novice DFS player would do this week. Then I'm going to show you what somebody that knows how to play the game theory edge would do in building a lineup. So if you're a novice this week, you're going to play very similar up top to some of the sharps, right? Like the guys up top are the best plays. Pretty much everybody from, I'd say, $9,000 plus. You can make an easy argument to play, right? Like even Dumpy Bo, right, at 17%. But we're going to assume here that the novice player doesn't understand ownership, right? He's just kind of like clicking the names that he likes. That novice player is very likely to take one of the top three, whether it's an Aberg, a Young, or a Thagala. I would say that Aberg, right, probably the most popular out of the three, but plenty of those, low tier players, right? I'll still play like a Cam Young, who's lower owned, or a Sahith Thagala at 10.7, who's a little bit cheaper. So for the sake of this, we'll go ahead and throw a Thagala in there. Down here, the 9K range, they're going to try and take their safe pick, right? They've probably seen Svensson on a few leaderboards of late. They know that he's coming in quote unquote form. And if they're a subscriber to some of the big tout sites out there, in terms of like a point per dollar projection, Svensson's one of the better plays on the slate, him and Luke List. So let's go ahead, throw Svensson in there, but you could say Luke List, right? Fits that same kind of description. And up top, right? I don't think this is a horrible start. Just for full transparency, right? Like Thagala, Svensson aren't horrible plays. Where the novice player starts to make mistakes is with the rest of his lineup, right? So with these next few picks is where I think you're starting to make mistakes. So again, this is not how I would build lineups, right? I'm kind of showing you the thought process of the slapdicks out there, right? The casual DFS players, which is hopefully not you. If you're somebody that builds lineups like this, I'm not talking shit. I'm trying to help you, okay? So down here in the 8K range is where you really start to make mistakes, right? If you're a casual. And this 8K range, you've got some really good pivots, right? You've got the Putnams that you could take at low ownership. Heck, even like a, Mark Hubbard, I'd say like a Keith Mitchell, Kuchar, all low owned, pretty decent plays, right? High upside in terms of their long-term pedigree. Unfortunately, all of them are playing pretty shit golf of late. And I can tell you that all the slappies that are sitting on the toilet tonight, right, building their lineups, going to click through that game log, right? They're going to go, oh, how's Kuchar been playing of late, right? And see missed cuts, right? Kuchar, pretty good last time out, right? He finished like T7. So maybe not with Kuchar, but with some of the other guys like Keith Mitchell, so on and so forth, they'll see a pretty shaky record, right, over their last few starts, and they won't play those sort of players. The guys that they're going to play down here in the 8K range, and it's why they're getting so much ownership, like a Davis Thompson, right, who's 3 for 3 on made cuts this year. They go, oh, wow, that guy Cameron Champ, right? Oh, I've seen him win before, right? Let's see how he's playing. Like, oh, okay, T59, he made a cut, right? It was a no-cut event, right? So the slappies are going to sit there and go, oh, you made the cut. That's good at least, right? He finished in next to last place for full transparency. And then before that, he had like a T18, a T9 finish. They're going to eat that up, right? So that's why Cam Champ is going to get a lot of ownership out there. It's just all these like very obvious, decent, recent form players are who the players are going to click on, rather than the Andrew Putnams, rather than some of the pivots over here that I think are the guys that you should be taking. So down here in the 7K range, they might throw in some, maybe they saw my video, right? They're like, oh, we're going to play Davis Riley, right? Luke said to play Davis Riley this week, which is great. I'm playing Davis Riley, right? I don't want to talk too much shit about my pick, but he's pretty chalky this week, right? He's like 10% owned. So maybe you throw him into the lineup, right? Because somebody said that he was good. And then for your last man in, let's throw that Kevin Yu guy in, right? Everyone's talked him up, right, over the last few months. They're all going to end up on the same sort of players. And your lowest owned player in this lineup, by the way, right? Riley's like 10%, 16% Cameron Champ, 14% Svensson. I think Thagala was right around 20%. Kevin Yu is your lowest owned player. And just to give you his ownership number, right? This is your lowest owned player in the lineup. He's 5.2%. Now, that's not egregious, right? It's not like he's mega chalky for that range. But when your lowest owned player is 5% owned, right, we're not going to do the last selection because DraftKings gets real pissed off about that. If your last owned guy is 5% owned, you're not different enough. Okay. You're not even close to different enough. You have one pivot in this lineup. Let's assume, just for the sake of this, that your last pick was probably pretty chalky. You're going to maybe duplicate yourself in the large field GPP, but more than that, have no leverage, right? You're going to have a really hard time actually moving up the leaderboard. So I would try to avoid these kind of lineups if you can. It just to show you that it doesn't take that much to get different, right? Like I said, this start of like Thagala Svensson, not that bad, right? Like if you're going to take chalk, you do it up top. That's fine. You eat that chalk, you move on. We've said that plenty of times here on the channel, right? It's not new. What's new, right, is here in the 8K range is where like you throw in a Putnam, right? Like I know I mentioned him before, like he's sub 5% owned. He's kind of like the Ben Griffin, who's not that bomber off the tee. It's why a lot of people aren't going to play Putnam this week. But Putnam's an okay putter. He's been pretty good on past Paulum, which is good to see. But on top of that, a really, really good iron player, right? One of the best iron players in this field. So when you're looking at it from that angle, he's maybe not the prototype this week, but compared to the guys around him, I think he's a better player than most of them. And he's like sometimes 3-4 times lower owned. So you throw in a Putnam, that gets you a little bit different. Maybe down here in the 7K range, you force in a pivot, right? You go, okay, I'm going to take somebody to force this lineup to be a little bit different than some of the others around it. Maybe you take like there's not a ton of low-end guys here towards the top of the 7K range, truth be told. But like, I don't love McNeely this week. I'm not playing him. He'd be a perfect candidate, right? He's going to be sub 5% owned. So in this lineup, you got a sub 5% owned Putnam. You got another sub 5% owned player, right, in Maverick McNeely. One of your value plays is probably going to be like another 5% owned guy. So you've got 3 pivots as opposed to the 1 pivot, right, over in the other lineup. But on top of that, your pivot was in the 8K range, right? Rather than taking a super chalky piece there in the 8K range, you went down to somebody that was sub 4% owned. When you go out there, calculate your product ownership, that has a massive, massive impact, right? Because not only are you using, 1-2 pivots in your lineup, you're taking away one of those pieces of chalk. So it's not that hard to accomplish, right? To build a lineup that won't be duplicated, that has enough leverage for those large field contests. You just have to be cognizant of it, right? You can't have a lineup that has all 6 chalky players, right? Or even like 5 chalky players out of 6. You probably want at least 2 pivots in every single lineup that you're entering. And it's just something that you can do with rules on your optimizer, or you can do by hand, right? If you're hand building your lineups. Outside of that, that's all I've got for DFS. So if you have any questions, go ahead, throw them down in chat. But other than that, let's take a look at the prop board, which for Underdog is not the best. I've been playing a lot of NBA props, so that's actually where a lot of my exposure is tonight. But if you take a look at the PGA board, the reason why I don't say it's the best is because we only have strokes up, right? So they only have the 1 category. And if you guys didn't know, if you wanted to go out there and enter 2 fades, they've blocked that off, right? So just to show you this, went out there, took 2 overs on fades. It's going to tell you that you can't do that, right? Your pick's duplicated. You can't take the same side for a golf entry. So that's pretty shit. We'll talk about why here in a second, because let's just circle back to it, right? I said that this golf course at the beginning of the week, I thought it would play really, really easy, right? The weather looks perfect, right? So why would I want to take overs on strokes? I'll show you why. So let's hop over to Prize Picks and let me give you an idea, because I think the board is criminally mispriced. Dang it, Prize Picks does not look to be working. Let me reload that, reshare it. Let's see, is it loading up? Or did Prize Picks die on us? Projections not available. Is that just me? It might just be me. Let me double check. Projections not available. Oh boy. Let's take a look at it on mobile, I suppose, huh? It might just be me. It probably is. No, it doesn't look like it's working on my mobile either. All right. Well, it might be a shit out of luck. I can just let you know what I'm doing anyways, right? We don't have to have the board up. So let's bring up the Underdog projections. They're the exact same as what they have over there on Prize Picks, which is no coincidence. The Underdog board came out just after Prize Picks came out with theirs, and they have the same exact projections. It's like they copy and pasted them, like they did. So they have the same projections up. They have guys at 68.5 strokes. They got guys like Sahith Theegala at 68 strokes. He has to shoot -5 to go under. Now, if this course plays to a 2.5 under par scoring average, it's realistic that guys could shoot 5 under, right? It's not impossible to go out there, gain 2.5 free strokes to the field, but that's a best case scenario, right? If we think this is going to play 2.5 strokes under par, that's like the easiest course on tour, right? It's up there in the top 5 easiest courses on the PGA Tour. That's within the range of outcomes. But to say that for certain is, I think, a huge mistake. And just to give you an idea, over there on Data Golf, right, a site that prides themselves on really making solid projections, one of the few tout sites that I would recommend to anybody out there. I'm a subscriber myself, right? I look at a lot of their stuff. That's why I would definitely recommend it to a lot of the other people out there. Point being is they have the scoring average at 0.7 under par. For round one, they have their like showdown numbers up. They have the scoring average at 0.1 under par. For a par 72, that's a 71.9 average, right? Now, let's say that maybe it plays, I think it's going to play at least a stroke under. Right? I think they're wrong about that projection. Just for full transparency, on that projection, I think they're wrong, right? I think it's going to play significantly easier, right, than just 0.7 strokes under par. But even if it only plays like 1.5 under, let's just split it down the middle, right? Let's take that 2.5 under par average. Let's take the Data Golf average and split it down the middle, right? If it's going to play to a 1 under par average or a 71, these guys have to gain 4 strokes to the field to go under. The guys at 68. The guys here at 68.5 have to go out there and gain 3 strokes to the field to go under, right? Now, if they gain 3 strokes to the field, the guys at 68 would push. That's, I guess, the point being there. But at the same time, that's a really hard thing to do, right? The best players on tour, like John Rahms, the Scotty Schefflers, the Rory McIlroys, don't gain 3 strokes per round, right? If they can eclipse that 3 shots gained per round average, that's when they're playing some of the best golf, right? And they have multiple wins, right? And they're like last 4 or 5 starts. That's the kind of golf it takes to do that. And I know it's a weaker field event, right? It's not major championships that we're talking about, but still to project guys at 3.5 under par, 4 under par is outrageous, right? That's them assuming is what it means, guys, is that they think the course is going to play 3, maybe 3.5 strokes under par. To me, that's insane. But like I said, Data Golf has it at 0.7 under, right? So if they think it's going to play 3 whole strokes under par, all the power to them, right? Like let them take that huge leap of faith and assume it's going to play that difficult. I'll take the overs. That's the thought process, right? And we don't have odds to compare to. So normally, right, we'd go through Draftkings, we'd look at odds, right? I have the NBA board up here actually. But normally, right, we'd go through the board, try and figure out what we're working with. They don't even have them up, right? They don't even have odds up, whether it's Fanduel, Draftkings, Caesars, Pinnacle, all those different sports books, because I guess they're waiting for round 1 to see. So if anything for round 1, I'd be looking at fades. The unfortunate part with Underdog, right, is that they only have the strokes up. So I would stick to prize picks, right? Mix in a few fades over there. Maybe take another prop from another sport so you don't get completely screwed when it comes to the payout multiplier. And you should be good to go. Let's see if prize picks is going to open. It wasn't working a minute ago. And it looks like it's still not working. All right, well, nothing we can do on that end. Going to go ahead and cut off the stream here at that point. Hopefully all you guys feel a little bit more prepared for your contest this week. And let's go out there and have ourselves a week. Best of luck in those DFS contests. Hope to see you at a few of the tops of some of the leaderboards, and should be a good one. It's the kind of week where if you play that game theory edge, if you put in the research, do the time, it should pay off, right? A lot of people are going to be lazy this week. They're going to fall into those, common narratives that you see around the industry. And in a few cases, I think they're mistakes. So if they go our direction, should be a good one. We'll have to see if it plays our way. Now, either way, appreciate all the support out there, guys, and best of luck on your end.